For 5 years at the helm of Burkina Faso, my phone never rang without weight behind it. Every call carried intent. Every voice carried pressure. I received ultimatums. I received threats. I received late-night calls timed to wear down resistance and force decisions that served everyone except my people. Foreign diplomats reached out with warnings dressed as advice. Corporate actors came with demands framed as partnerships. Institutional voices spoke in polished language, careful and controlled, yet clear in implication. They never said it outright, but the message said beneath every word, my position depended on my willingness to cooperate. I expected all of that. I trained for it. I studied it. I prepared my mind for every variation of pressure that power tends to apply. What I did not prepare for was something entirely different. A call that came on a Thursday afternoon at exactly 2:47 p.m. Not a threat. Not an ultimatum. Not a demand. A request. A request for help. And not from just anyone. From the last person I ever expected to hear those words from. When I saw the number flash on my phone, I did not answer immediately. I stared at it. 11 seconds passed. In those 11 seconds, something shifted inside me. Because I understood something before even hearing a single word. The world had changed. Not slowly. Not in theory. Not in some abstract geopolitical sense. It had changed in a direct, personal, undeniable way. The kind of change you feel when someone who once held all the leverage now reaches out, not to control you, but to depend on you. When I finally answered, I had already realized that this moment was not random. It was the result of something that had been building for years, even before I fully understood what I was building. What followed in that conversation, what was said, what was left unsaid, and the 3 years that made that call possible, all of it revealed something much bigger. Not just about me. Not just about Burkina Faso. But about where Africa stands in the world today. To understand why that call shook me, you need to look back. Because moments like that do not appear out of nowhere. They arrive at the end of something. In this case, 3 years of sustained pressure. 3 years where every interaction, every signal, every move from outside forces followed the same pattern. Pressure. Consistent. Deliberate. Calculated. Let me take you back to the beginning. When I first stepped into office, the signal started almost immediately. Not loudly. Not publicly. Not through official channels. They came quietly. Through indirect language. Through carefully phrased conversations. Through the kind of communication powerful institutions prefer when they want influence without accountability. The message was simple. Burkina Faso's decisions, about its resources, its alliances, its direction in the world, would be supported if they aligned with certain external interests. If they did not, those decisions would be managed. I understood exactly what that meant. And I chose not to comply. What followed was not surprising. 3 years of increasing pressure. Financial pressure. Diplomatic pressure. Narratives pushed through media about instability, about governance failure, about risk. And always, the calls. Late-night calls. Urgent calls. Calls designed to corner, to rush, to force decisions under pressure. But there is something important about those 3 years that I have not fully explained before. They were not just years of resistance. They were years of learning. Every attempt to pressure us revealed something. Every financial move exposed a mechanism. Every diplomatic action showed who controlled what. Every coordinated narrative revealed how influence operates behind the scenes. Every threat was not just pressure. It was information. And I paid attention. By the end of those 3 years, I understood the system being used against my government in a way that many of its own architects did not. Not because I was more intelligent. Because I was the target. There is a kind of knowledge you only gain when you are on the receiving end. When you feel exactly where the pressure is applied. When you see which actions trigger which responses. When you experience firsthand how systems are designed to shape outcomes. Those applying the pressure had used these methods for so long, across so many countries, that they no longer examined them closely. For them, it had become routine. For me, it was new. So I studied every detail. I observed every move. I recorded every pattern. I learned every lesson. For 3 years, I absorbed it all. At the same time, I continued building. Quietly. Consistently. Without distraction. And I waited. Not for a specific call. But for a moment. A moment I knew would come. The moment when the tools that had worked for decades would stop working. The moment when pressure would no longer produce compliance. The moment when those applying that pressure would realize something had changed. When that moment arrived, the number that appeared on my phone was not one I expected. but the call itself. That, I had been preparing for all along. I want to tell you who called. Not by name. This is bigger than one individual. But understand this clearly. The voice on the other end represented a government that had played a direct role in nearly every form of pressure applied to my administration over those 3 years. Not from a distance. Not as a passive observer. They were active. Intentional. Precise. Their influence showed up through financial channels. Through diplomatic moves. Through coordinated narratives. They were present in the late-night calls. They were behind the ultimatums. They supported the framing of our decisions as reckless and destabilizing. I tracked all of it. Not to retaliate. But to understand. Because if you want to build something that cannot be dismantled, you need to know exactly how others try to dismantle you. So when their number appeared on my phone, I did not think, why are they calling? I thought, what has changed on their side? Because this was not a relationship built on casual conversation. Every previous interaction had a purpose. Every message had an objective. I want to tell you who called. Not by name. This is bigger than one individual. But understand this clearly. The voice on the other end represented a government that had played a direct role in nearly every form of pressure applied to my administration over those 3 years. Not from a distance. Not as a passive observer. They were active. Intentional. Precise. Their influence showed up through financial channels. Through diplomatic moves. Through coordinated narratives. They were present in the late-night calls. They were behind the ultimatums. They supported the framing of our decisions as reckless and destabilizing. I tracked all of it. Not to retaliate. But to understand. Because if you want to build something that cannot be dismantled, you need to know exactly how others try to dismantle you. So when their number appeared on my phone, I did not think, why are they calling? I thought, what has changed on their side? Because this was not a relationship built on casual conversation. Every previous interaction had a purpose. Every message had an objective. While they spent 3 years applying pressure, we spent those same 3 years building something else. Trust. Not perfect trust. Not universal agreement. Real trust. The kind built through consistency. Through honoring commitments. Through choosing long-term relationships over short-term advantage. We worked with leaders. With institutions. With communities. And we showed, through action, that our word meant something. That our interests were real. Not performative. Not transactional. That kind of trust cannot be rushed. It cannot be bought. It cannot be manufactured in a moment of crisis. It takes time. And while we were building it, they were doing the opposite. They applied pressure where partnership was needed. They imposed conditions where trust should have been earned. They treated relationships as tools instead of commitments. Now they faced a situation that required exactly what they had failed to build. Genuine cooperation. And they could not force it. They could not buy it. They could not demand it. The only path to what they needed ran through us. Through Ouagadougou. Through me. They said it clearly. We need access to the relationships your government has built. There are actors in this region we cannot reach directly. We believe you can. I asked one question. Why do you believe I would help you? There was a pause. 8 seconds. Then they answered. Because we believe you act on principle, not resentment. And regional stability benefits your people as much as ours. That response changed the tone of everything. Because they were not wrong. And that made the situation more complex than it looked. I did not respond immediately. Not as a tactic. I was thinking. Because the easy answer was clear. No. No, because of the pressure. No, because of the ultimatums. No, because of the attempts to control our decisions. No, because of the way Burkina Faso had been treated. That answer would have felt right. It would have been justified. It would have been supported. Anyone watching those 3 years would have understood it. But I did not choose that answer. And the reason matters more than the answer itself. I did not spend 3 years building independence to use it for revenge. Revenge gives you a moment. But it costs you the future. Leaders cannot afford that trade. My responsibility was not my emotions. My responsibility was my people. 22 million people. Their needs were real. Immediate. And their future could not be shaped by a decision driven by anger. So I asked myself a different question. Not what feels right. But what serves my people. And when I looked at it clearly, without emotion interfering, the answer was not refusal. The answer was leverage. If they needed something we had, then the question was not whether to help. The question was what that help was worth. Not in feelings. In outcomes. I also thought about the principle they mentioned. Regional stability. Yes, they used it to persuade. But that does not make it false. Instability in neighboring countries affects us. Refugees. Supply disruptions. Security risks. A stable region benefits Burkina Faso, regardless of who else benefits. So I held three things in my mind at once. The anger. The strategy. The principle. Then I made my decision. And when I spoke, it was not what they expected. I said, 3 years ago, before the pressure, before the ultimatums, I would have helped without conditions. Because neighbors help neighbors. Because stability benefits everyone. I paused. Then continued. But your actions did not weaken us. They taught us. Every threat became a lesson. You spent 3 years trying to break us. Instead, you trained us. The line went quiet. Then I added. I will help you. Not because of the past. Not because of pressure. Because it serves my people. But this time, there are conditions. I did not rush the conditions. Each one had weight. Each one had purpose. This was not about making a point. This was about setting a new standard. I said. First, there must be a written acknowledgement. Not an apology. An acknowledgement that the pressure placed on Burkina Faso violated the principle of sovereign equality. No emotion. No accusation. Just clarity. Second, there must be clear and verifiable mechanisms that change how your government engages with us and with our regional partners going forward. Not promises. Not statements. Mechanisms. Something that could be measured. Something that could not be ignored. Then I gave the most important condition. Third, Burkina Faso must have a real seat at the table. Not symbolic presence. Not observation. Decision-making power on matters that affect our region. I paused. Then I made it simple. You need what we have built. The price of access is recognizing what it took to build it. The call ended. No agreement yet. No rejection. Just silence. 4 hours later, my phone rang again. Same number. Same weight. They spoke first. President Traoré, we accept your conditions. I did not react immediately. All three? I asked. All three. When I ended the call, my chief of staff looked at me in disbelief. He said, in 20 years, I have never seen a powerful nation accept conditions from an African leader. I answered him simply. They accepted because they had no alternative. They needed something they could not create themselves. They needed trust. And trust does not appear on demand. It is built. Slowly. Consistently. Over time. What followed was not symbolic. It was real. The acknowledgement was signed. The new mechanisms were put in place. And Burkina Faso gained something it had long been denied. A genuine voice. Not presence. Influence. Not participation. Authority. But something even more important happened. Within 6 weeks, 3 other African governments reached out to my office. They all asked the same question. How did you get them to accept your conditions? I gave them a simple answer. They agreed in 4 hours. Then I paused. But it took 3 years to make those 4 hours possible. That is the part people miss. The moment looks fast. The preparation is long. Here is the real lesson. Power is not what most people think. It is not primarily military. It is not primarily financial. Real power is relational. It comes from trust. From partnerships built before they are needed. From consistency when it is difficult. From standing firm when pressure is applied. The nation that called me had strength. Military strength. Financial strength. But they lacked something more valuable. Trust. And when they needed what only trust could provide, they had no choice but to come to the one who had been building it all along. There is always a moment. A moment when those who underestimated you realize what you built. A moment when they need access to something they cannot force, buy, or replicate. When that moment comes, nothing else matters. Not status. Not history. Not noise. Only what you have built. Only what you can offer. Only the value you hold. So understand this. The call will come. Not always in the way you expect. Not always when you are ready. But it will come. And when it does, the only thing that will matter is what you spent your time building before that moment arrived. Build wisely. Stay consistent. Know your value. And when your moment comes, answer it on your terms.